so if we look at our first sentence here, our subject, Barbary, those are the barbarians, they're our subject. So we'll start with them, even though they come later in the sentence. And then we've got this word nam here, for. So we'll have for the barbarians. Now our barbarians are permoti, they're frightened. So they're frightened for the barbarians. Frightened. And then be frightened by several things. So it's an ablative of means. They're frightened by the figura, by the motu, and by the genere. They're frightened by the form of the ships. So notice we haven't done this et yet. We're going to talk about that et in a minute. We've got et, and et that are combining the things that they're frightened by. Frightened by the form of the ships and the motion of the oars. Okay, and they're also frightened by the unusual type of tormentum. So now a tormentum literally means a twisting, and that came to mean a machine that twisted a rope for throwing something. So we've been translating it as a catapult. So they're frightened by the form of the ships, by the motion of the oars, and the unusual type of catapults. Okay, so what did they do? So we've got that they were frightened by these things. Okay, so now we have the verb. They stopped. So they constituent. So for the barbarians, frightened by all of these things, comma, stopped. And then we have acapella modo, a little bit. They brought back their feet a little bit. They retreated a little bit. Stopped and. It's an and. Retreated just a little. Okay, so there's our first sentence. For the barbarians, frightened by the form of the ships and the motion of the oars, notice the genitive here, genitive and genitive, and then this adjective modifies genere, and the unusual type of catapults, stopped and retreated, literally brought back their feet just a little. Okay, well, let's see if there's any other interesting grammar here to look at. You notice that we had these three ets here, et, and et. So we have the repetition of a conjunction, and there's a name for that. That's called Polysenditon. So poly means more than one. The sin is and, so that's the conjunction. So Polysenditon, you've got more than one conjunction in there. That's contrasting with asenditon, which is when you leave out a conjunction, when you would have one in there, but you leave it out. Okay, so let's see, that's all for that sentence. Let's go on to the next sentence. And then here we have an ablative absolute, and, so here's our ablative absolute. So, and, with our soldiers hesitating, okay, so there's our ablative absolute. You might have noticed that this verb comes from cunctor, which is a deponent verb, but it's a present active looking participle. It's one time that deponent verbs look active, is in the present active participle. So, and with our soldiers hesitating, maxime chiefly mainly, this is the reason why they're hesitating, so chiefly because of, that's the prop there, the depth of the sea, okay, so, and with our soldiers hesitating, chiefly because of the depths of the sea. And then this qui here, this is an example of where in Latin you don't have the antecedents, you're just going to throw it in. The one who was bearing the eagle of the 10th legion. And so, and as you know, the eagle was the standard for the legion, and the person who carried it was, you know, really someone special. And each legion, soldiers were very devoted to their eagle, you know, and they guarded it very jealously. So the guy who carried the eagle had some sort of special pull with the soldiers. So the one who was carrying the eagle of the 10th legion, so the one who is carrying the eagle of the 10th legion. And then we have this participle here. Now this is a deponent verb, so even though it looks like it's passive, we're going to translate it actively. So having entreated the gods, having beseeched the gods, so I'll just say having entreated the gods. Okay, having entreated the gods. And then in just a second we'll say what it was that he was entreating the gods. So he's going to entreat the gods this is what he's asking the gods to do. So I'll get there in just a second. Let's just go over what we've done so far. And with our soldiers hesitating chiefly because of the depth of the sea, the one who was carrying the eagle of the 10th legion, having entreated the gods. So that's from here to here. So that's what we've done so far. I think nothing terribly interesting in grammar there. So I'm going to erase that. Now we're going to say what it was that he was entreating the gods. So he was entreating the gods that this thing, that this thing turn out favorably, happily, fortunately, that this thing turn out fortunately. So having entreated the gods that this thing turn out fortunately, said, jump, soldiers, nisi, unless, vultus, you wish, to prodere, to hand over, to betray, unless you wish to betray the eagle to the enemies. Okay, and then semicolon. Okay, so let's take a look at a little bit of what we have there. This clause right here. So this is having entreated the gods. Now, having entreated the gods, something that he's entreating the gods, and this it makes it like it's a noun. This is the thing that he's entreating the gods. So when you have something that's like a noun, then that's called a substantive clause. So this is a substantive clause. And it is of purpose, because he's asking, for something to happen, of purpose. Substantive clause of purpose. And it's also called volative. 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 That comes from the Latin word volo, meaning to wish. So volative. So it's a volative substantive clause of purpose. And you'll notice that this is an imperfect subjunctive. So, and prodere is an infinitive, going with vultus, unless you wish to betray. Okay, and let's see, anything else interesting there? Feliciter, that's a word. It's like, it's used frequently when you're asking for something favorable to come from the gods. Alright, let's finish this part off. And so now the one who is bearing the eagle says for himself, he says, I certainly. I certainly, and then here we have a future perfect. We don't see future perfects that often. I certainly will have exhibited, shown my duty. So meum officium. I certainly will have displayed, maybe, my duty to the Republic and my commander. And I think the only thing I have in here to note is that that was future perfect. So I certainly will have displayed my duty, meum officium, to the Republic and my commander. So the eagle bearer is really trying to urge on the rest of the men. Okay, so going on from here, we have a temporal clause with cum. So here's our cum. Oops. So here's our cum. So we've got a cum clause. Our cum clause. Pluperfect subjunctive. So when he had said this with a large voice, okay, then he projecit se, he threw himself, or you could just say jumped. So he jumped from the ship. And began to carry the eagle toward the enemy. Okay, so the only real grammar point here was what I'd already mentioned, that this cum clause, it's a temporal, indicating time. We've noticed sometimes you use subjunctive, sometimes you've used indicative, so this one is subjunctive, and it's pluperfect subjunctive, so pluperfect when he had said this. And so when he had said this with a large voice, he jumped from the ship and began to carry the eagle toward the enemy. You could say enemies if you wanted to, or you can just treat that as a just a plural. The enemy as a group is plural. Okay, so now going on from here. So then our men encouraging among themselves, and we can just say that as each other. So then our men sorry about that. Then our men encouraging each other. And then we have this clause here. And this clause is another volitive, subjunctive, substantive clause of purpose. So it's a substantive clause of purpose, except they want this not to happen. So it's a purpose clause that something not happen, and it's something that they want not to happen. So what are they encouraging each other? They're encouraging each other lest such a disgrace should occur. So what disgrace would that be? It would be the eagle getting to the enemy. Then our men encouraging each other lest such a disgrace occur, all together jumped from the ship. Okay, so then our men encouraging each other lest such a disgrace occur, all together jumped from the ship. Okay, so the main thing to notice here, again, this purpose clause, that's the main thing it is a purpose clause. It's also substantive because it's renaming what it is that they're encouraging each other. They're encouraging each other this thing, and it's volitive because it's a wish for what they want to occur. I think that's it. Okay, now we have some funky word order coming up here. So this is a cum clause, and it's a cum clause, but we have some interlocked word order. So it's when, and we have when the first men, or the men in front, from the neighboring ships, so the closest ships, so when the men in front from the closest ships had caught sight of them, meaning the ones that had jumped down. And so this interlocking word order, if you look the primi here, the first men, they're in between these two words that go together. So the first men from the, let's see, how does your book do it? The closest ships, the first men on the closest ships. So that's interlocking word order because this is between those two. So, and then it's a cum clause. The cum is delayed until later in the sentence. So when the first men, meaning the men up front, on the closest ships, had caught sight, notice imperfect subjunctive, had caught sight of them, that's the host, so there's the people who had jumped down before. Item, likewise, having followed closely, or yes, having followed closely, approached to the enemy. Okay, so a couple things here. First, we talked about this being interlocking word order, so interlocked word order. I'll write that, maybe. Interlocked word order. And the last thing I want to talk about is this last word here. Let me just reread the translation. When the first men on the closest ships had caught sight of them, likewise, having followed closely, I guess I should have put a they in there. They approached the enemy. Okay, so this last word in the sentence, in your text it's spelled differently. Let me write how it's spelled in your text. APPROPINQUARUNT. Okay, this is a syncopated form of this. If you notice, if you take out the VE, you get this form. And you're going to see that commonly with different perfect forms. It's just kind of like a contraction, so it's called a syncopated form. So this is perfect, just like that is perfect. And this is dative because it goes with a compound verb. So dative with a compound verb.